So imagine waking up tomorrow and just discovering that literally overnight, the United States agreed to write a $300 billion check to one of its oldest rivals in the Middle East.
Right. Just out of nowhere.
Exactly, out of nowhere. And then, imagine turning on the news, only to find that the politicians cheering the absolute loudest for this massive payout are the exact same ones who spent the last decade demanding military action against that very rival.
I mean, it is the absolute definition of geopolitical whiplash. We are looking at a fundamental rewiring of international relations. And it was all drawn up and signed before most people even realized the negotiation was happening.
Yeah, which is wild. So welcome to this deep dive. Today we are immersing ourselves in what has to be one of the most stunning, head-spinning developments in recent memory.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about the sudden signing of a 14-point Memorandum of Understanding, an MOU, between the United States and Iran, executed by President Donald Trump.
And to really understand the sheer scale of the shockwaves radiating from this agreement, we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources today.
We've got a lot to get through.
We do. We have the official full text of the MOU as published by Fox News. We are also analyzing the immediate mainstream conservative reaction, including interviews from a recent Fox News broadcast.
Right.
And to get the view from the other side of the aisle, we are pulling commentary from the progressive left-wing political YouTube channel called Vance.
So our mission today is to dissect the specific mechanisms of this 60-day agreement, explore the absolutely wild political realignment happening in real time, and figure out what this $300 billion pivot means for you, your daily cost of living and global stability.
Yeah, how it hits your wallet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, really quick, because we are dealing with intense, highly charged reactions from across the political spectrum today, from Fox News to progressive channels like Vaush, our goal isn't to pick a side. We're not endorsing these raw reactions.
Right. We aren't here to celebrate or condemn the deal at all.
No, not at all. Our goal is simply to map the blast radius impartially, unpacking the arguments and the logic from both sides so you can form your own opinion.
We are just looking at the blueprints of this massive policy shift, really analyzing how it was built and who it impacts.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sheer optics of this moment are just, they're unprecedented. Let's start with the where, because the setting alone is loaded with historical baggage.
Oh, is it ever?
President Trump signed this agreement at the Palace of Versailles, just outside Paris.
Yeah, and that historical irony is profound. It's actually something the left-wing commentary immediately seized upon. I mean, in modern diplomacy, the Palace of Versailles is most famous as the site where World War I officially ended.
Right, the Treaty of Versailles.
Exactly. And the Treaty of Versailles was notorious for imposing ruinous, crushing financial reparations on Germany. It basically forced the defeated party to pay astronomical sums to the victors.
And that flips the entire historical script here.
Yeah.
In this scenario, as the progressive commentary points out, the dynamic is completely inverted.
Totally upside down.
Yeah, the United States isn't extracting reparations after a conflict. Through this MOU, the U.S. is the one essentially agreeing to orchestrate a massive payday for Iran.
Right, which brings us to the actual timeline and the specific mechanics of the document itself. It is critical to understand that this is not a permanent peace treaty.
It's not.
No, it is a 60-day window. It's a temporary 2-month ceasefire designed to serve as a framework to negotiate a final permanent deal.
But, I mean, the sheer volume of concessions packed into that tiny 60-day window is just staggering. Instead of just walking down a boring list, let's group these into what they actually represent, starting with the massive military stand-down.
Yeah.
The U.S. and Iran are agreeing to an immediate, permanent ceasefire on all fronts. And the document explicitly goes out of its way to include Lebanon in that ceasefire.
Which is huge. And beyond just stopping the shooting, the United States is agreeing to structurally dismantle its military posture in the region.
Completely dismantle it.
Yeah, the U.S. has committed to ending its naval blockade within 30 days and completely removing its forces from the immediate proximity of Iran.
We are talking about shifting carrier strike groups and altering the entire operational capacity of the Fifth Fleet in a matter of weeks.
Right. But the military side is really just the appetizer here.
Yeah, the main course is the money.
Exactly. The main course of this MOU is the economic windfall. The United States is agreeing to drop all sanctions. And we need to be really clear about what that actually means.
We aren't just talking about primary sanctions, right, where U.S. companies can't do business with Iran.
No, they are dropping secondary sanctions too.
Which is wild.
It is, because that's where the real teeth of U.S. economic warfare actually live. Secondary sanctions don't just restrict American businesses, they punish any foreign company, anywhere in the world, that dares to do business with Iran.
So by dropping those, alongside the United Nations sanctions and immediately unfreezing Iranian assets, the U.S. is essentially giving the Iranian central bank full, unhindered access to the global financial system overnight.
Overnight. And as if that wasn't enough, the U.S. and its regional partners are committing to develop a mutually agreed plan to generate at least $300 billion for the reconstruction and economic development of Iran.
Okay, just to put that number into perspective for you listening, $300 billion is roughly a quarter of what the United States spent on its massive, once-in-a-generation, bipartisan domestic infrastructure bill.
A quarter of the whole thing.
Yeah, and the U.S. is pledging to organize that kind of capital for a foreign adversary.
But in exchange for this monumental economic and military shift, Iran's concessions are incredibly specific.
What are they giving up?
First, they agree to open the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical oil choke points, for commercial vessels, with no tolls for these 60 days.
Okay.
Second, they reaffirm they will not build nuclear weapons, and they agree to downblend their enriched material under the supervision of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency.
So let's clarify that technical piece for a second. Downblending basically means Iran is taking highly enriched uranium, the stuff that gets you perilously close to a nuclear weapon, and chemically mixing it with natural or depleted uranium.
Right, diluting it.
Exactly. Diluting it back down to a grade that can only be used for civilian power plants.
What's fascinating here is the sheer asymmetry of the timeline. I mean, the United States is immediately surrendering its most powerful long-term economic and military leverage, evaporating secondary sanctions, dissolving a blockade, and committing to a $300 billion fund.
All of that right away.
Yes, for what is essentially a short-term 60-day guarantee of open shipping lanes and a temporary pause on nuclear development.
To make this relatable, it's like a high-stakes geopolitical escrow account.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. The United States is dumping massive cash reserves and total financial freedom into this escrow account, while Iran is basically just promising to leave the front door unlocked and pause their dangerous science fair projects for 60 days just to see if they can finalize the long-term paperwork.
It's an astronomical gamble. And the reaction to that gamble has completely shattered the traditional political alliances in Washington.
Oh, for sure. Let's pivot to the mainstream conservative perspective from our Fox News sources, because it reveals a massive bleeding fracture within the right between immediate economic goals and long-term national security fears.
Well, from the Trump administration's point of view, this deal is an undeniable, spectacular economic victory.
Oh, yeah.
The president is defending it fiercely, strictly on those grounds. Our sources highlight that he was posting on social media at 4:30 in the morning, calling critics of the deal fools and stupid.
His entire argument hinges on the immediate relief you feel in your wallet. I mean, he's pointing to the fact that the stock market just hit a record high upon the announcement, global oil prices are tumbling down, and the national average for gas is dropping below $4 a gallon.
So for the administration, the logic is simple. A booming market and cheaper fuel totally justify the diplomatic cost.
But national security conservatives within his own party are viewing this as a catastrophic error.
Oh, yeah.
You have prominent figures like Republican Senator Bill Cassidy publicly stating that President Ronald Reagan is rolling in his grave over this agreement.
And we get some very precise tactical pushback from Rebecca Henricks. She's a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, and she was interviewed on the Fox broadcast.
Right.
She is deeply alarmed by the physical mechanics of this MOU. She specifically points to the recent U.S. military air campaign known as Epic Fury.
Epic Fury, right.
According to the sources, this was a highly successful, sustained campaign where the U.S. spent months systematically hunting down and destroying a massive portion of Iran's ballistic missile capabilities and their mobile launchers.
So she's terrified that this $300 billion pledge and all the freshly unfrozen assets aren't going to stay in some tightly regulated escrow account.
Exactly.
She warns that without draconian controls, that money is going straight to the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is Iran's core military branch, to fund what she explicitly calls terrorist reconstruction.
Basically buying back all the weapons the U.S. just spent months blowing up.
Right. And furthermore, Hinrichs identifies a massive semantic loophole regarding the Strait of Hormuz.
Oh, the toll thing.
Yeah, the MOU explicitly says Iran won't collect tolls for 60 days. But in international maritime law, there is a vast difference between a toll for simple transit passage and a fee for services rendered.
So she worries Iran will simply maintain military control of the strait and mandate that all commercial ships pay exorbitant environmental protection fees or, like, mandatory security escort fees.
Functionally, they would be extorting the exact same money while adhering flawlessly to the strict letter of the text.
Right. Plus, she argues that by lifting the secondary oil sanctions right now, the U.S. is just throwing away the only non-military leverage it had to force Iran into a permanent nuclear agreement on day 61.
Okay, I have to push back on the underlying logic of the administration here because the contradiction is blinding.
It really is.
Wait, if the U.S. military just spent months risking pilot lives to destroy Iran's missile launchers during Operation Epic Fury, why is the administration suddenly okay with handing them the billions of dollars they need to rebuild them?
That's a big question.
And on top of that, why are President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance suddenly going on television to argue that it's only fair Iran has some ballistic missiles because regional neighbors like Saudi Arabia and Qatar have them?
Well, that specific contradiction illustrates the core philosophy shift here. Based on the sources, we are watching an administration that has fundamentally deprioritized the decades-old goal of disarming Iran.
Yeah.
They are actively trading away the objective of a missile-free Iran in exchange for immediate, tangible economic relief, specifically cheaper gas for the American consumer right now and a pause in shooting.
It's essentially standing at a podium and saying, we will absolutely tolerate a heavily rearmed Iran tomorrow as long as it means gas is under $4 today.
Precisely. The administration is calculating that the immediate economic boom will politically outweigh any future security risks that materialize down the line.
But it's not just the political right that is internally warring over this. Let's shift over to the progressive left-wing perspective from the Vouch YouTube channel.
Yeah, let's look at the left.
Because their view of this deal comes from a totally different philosophical universe, yet they are equally stunned by what just happened.
The progressive commentary characterizes this MOU in no uncertain terms. They say it is a total, unmitigated capitulation, a surrender.
The commentator argues that this deal is functionally far worse for U.S. interests than the Obama-era JCPOA, the original Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah.
He points out that this new MOU costs the United States about $300 billion more than the JCPOA ever did. And here's the real kicker he focuses on. He notes that the Strait of Hormuz was actually open to commercial shipping before this recent wave of conflict even started.
So from the left-wing perspective, the United States fought a highly destructive, incredibly costly regional conflict, launched massive operations like Epic Fury, only to turn around and agree to pay $300 billion just to buy back the exact same geopolitical status quo that existed before a single shot was fired.
But the left-wing source isn't just focused on the financial math. They are hyper-focused on the tectonic political realignment happening in Washington.
Oh, the shift in the GOP.
Exactly. They see a massive structural shift occurring within the Republican Party, and they point to Vice President J.D. Vance as the architect spearheading it.
Right, because historically, since the era of Bush and Cheney, the GOP has been fiercely Zionist, staunchly pro-Israel, and uniformly aggressively hawkish against Iran.
But the source describes the current Republican Party as actively fracturing, essentially abandoning its historical alliance with Israel in order to secure this populist economic deal with Iran.
It sounds like the progressive left is taking a strange sort of victory lap on the philosophy of negotiation, even while they're totally horrified by the $300 billion price tag.
That's a good point.
The left-wing commentator actually claims vindication here. He argues that progressive voices were always right in asserting that Iran needs to be treated as a rational nation-state that you can sit down and negotiate with, rather than treating them purely as an inherent evil that can only be bombed.
Right.
He claims that the power brokers in Washington secretly knew this all along and quietly knew that Israel's aggressive regional actions were sometimes a hindrance to wider peace.
And the profound irony, from his view, is that the America First isolationist wing of the Republican Party is now adopting the left's anti-war, pro-negotiation playbook.
Yeah.
Not out of some shared ideological morality, but purely for political survival and economic expediency. And that completely scrambles the map, leaving Democrats in a bizarre, politically trapped position.
Entirely.
To oppose Trump, Democrats might now have to either suddenly defend hawkish Israeli policy against a Republican administration trying to force a ceasefire, or they have to attack a Middle East peace deal solely because they don't like the $300 billion price tag attached to it.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
If the progressive left thinks this is an embarrassing, costly surrender, and traditional national security conservatives think it's a catastrophic terror-funding disaster, who exactly is this deal for?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Is this purely a ruthless play for a specific slice of the GOP base that wants lower gas prices and absolutely zero foreign wars, even if it means totally incinerating their historical alliance with Israel?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it looks exactly like that. I mean, this appears to be a deeply calculated move driven by domestic populism and the desire to build an unbeatable coalition for the 2028 elections.
Yeah.
The administration is gambling that the average American voter, looking at their 401k and their grocery bills, cares exponentially more about their daily cost of living and avoiding overseas entanglements than they do about maintaining long-standing foreign policy doctrines or traditional alliances in the Middle East.
They are rewriting 50 years of established foreign policy strictly for an immediate spike in domestic approval.
Which brings us to the most volatile, potentially explosive part of this entire situation, the wild cards.
The ones not in the room.
Right, because this MOU looks neat and comprehensive on paper, but it fundamentally applies to, and dictates terms for, regional actors who weren't even allowed in the room at Versailles when it was signed.
And we have a 60-day ticking clock, and the people actually holding the weapons on the ground are furious.
The most immediate glaring problem is Lebanon. The text of the MOU mandates a termination of military operations on all fronts, explicitly naming Lebanon as part of the ceasefire zone.
But the left-wing source notes a fatal flaw in this logic. Israel was allegedly kept entirely in the dark about the specifics of this agreement until the MOU was already signed and confirmed.
Right.
And Israel is the primary military force actively engaged in Lebanon.
Right. And Israel has already forcefully and publicly stated that they will not withdraw their forces from Lebanon and that they flat out do not agree to the terms of this MOU.
Well, from their perspective, they weren't signatories. Their security concerns were ignored, and they are refusing to abide by a ceasefire mandate that they had zero part in negotiating.
And because Israel is refusing to drop its weapons, the dominoes of this fragile deal are already starting to collapse. I mean, just hours after the Strait of Hormuz was opened to celebrate the MOU, Iran threatened to aggressively reclose it, citing Israel's continued military operations in Lebanon as a violation of the terms.
This places the Trump administration in a practically impossible diplomatic bind. I mean, the sources show the president issuing wildly divergent public ultimatums in multiple directions.
Oh?
On social media, he has publicly chastised Israel, calling them a hindrance to peace. But almost simultaneously, he is issuing severe warnings to Iran, stating that if they fail to live up to their end of the bargain...
Specifically regarding downblending their nuclear material.
Right, exactly. He warned that the United States will instantly tear up the MOU and go back to bombing Iranian targets.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? It's like the United States and Iran just sat down and signed a very strict, incredibly expensive roommate agreement to guarantee the house stays quiet.
Okay, yeah.
But the third roommate, Israel, was locked out of the house during the meeting, hates the new rules, and is currently threatening to set off the fire alarm.
That's exactly it.
If this fragile arrangement falls apart, we could be right back to blocked oil shipments, skyrocketing gas prices at your local station, and immediate military escalation.
This raises an important question. Can a bilateral MOU drafted between Washington and Tehran truly enforce regional peace when it completely ignores the active combatants on the ground?
It's hard to see how.
You simply cannot legislate a ceasefire on a piece of paper in Paris for a country in the Middle East that refuses to stop shooting.
It is a precarious, almost dizzying tightrope. To summarize what we've unpacked today, the Versailles MOU represents a historic, contradictory, and completely head-spinning pivot in American foreign policy.
On one hand, it is currently delivering immediate, highly tangible economic relief to the American public. Tumbling global oil prices, record-high stock markets, and cheap gas at the pump.
Right. On the other hand, it achieves that domestic economic high by promising $300 billion and sweeping sanctions relief to a historic adversary.
Yep.
And in the process, it has sparked massive, chaotic political civil wars on both the progressive left and the conservative right, regarding the United States' fundamental relationships with both Israel and Iran.
It is a temporary 60-day pause bought at an unimaginably high price, with deeply uncertain and potentially volatile long-term consequences.
We want to remind you, as you watch the news this week, check your retirement accounts or fill up your gas tank, that the current global stability and those amazingly low gas prices are hanging by a very fragile 2-month thread.
The clock is aggressively ticking down. And the heavily armed regional players who were deliberately left out of the negotiations still have a major say in how the story ends.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to ponder. If a temporary 60-day agreement can fundamentally rewrite decades of deeply entrenched partisan foreign policy, completely invert long-standing international alliances overnight, and turn the hawkish right into the party of anti-war negotiation,
Yeah.
what exactly happens when those 60 days are up? Are we looking at the dawn of a permanent, unrecognizable new geopolitical world order? Or is this just a 60-day economic mirage before the ultimate, inevitable conflict resumes? Let us know what you think.